Okay, preparing live stream. This could be the last virtual wine coach. I'm not going to tell everyone who's attending, but
that's a secret just for YouTube.
Everyone's asking me about in-person tastings, and I'm like, I gotta figure this out. Okay, I'm gonna let these people in.
Let's do it.
Yeah. They're gonna come on. They're gonna see me swirling wines and lounging some like luxuriously in the background.
Oh, hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
It's been like a month since I've done Zoom, and apparently it's all new. Everything's new again. So who knows what's going on? Seeing the end in sight of the Zoom era.
I'm sure most people would be happy to hear that. Very happy, I'm sure. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Happy Tuesday. Beautiful hot day to be drinking some fresh wine.
Delicious chilled reds.
Oh yeah.
Who we got coming? We'll wait a few more. We'll wait one more minute.
Yeah, definitely these reds I'm happy to drink on the cool side, let's say, fresh.
Absolutely. So good. Okay. The show on the road.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Wine Coach of Home. It's been a minute, but we're here, back again, joined by my dear friends and Spanish wine connoisseur. Brad, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's beautiful to be back on the computer drinking, I think, what will be very delicious wines with you.
We've been planning this since February, and we have finally got wines in front of us. We've finally been able to like figure out what we're going to do, and I can honestly say I've probably been wanting to taste all of like these wines for years, like maybe 3 years, and I finally get them in front of me and I can have a really deep dive. So this isn't I don't think me explaining a lot about what these wines are. It's just you all coming along for the journey. But always, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. 100%. There's a lot to cover. This is a really cool kind of flight that we don't often, if ever, get to do. So I'm really excited to do it. But I guess we should start off by, Brad, maybe tell everyone a little bit about the producer. Who are we drinking? What is this all about?
Yeah, the producer is Envinate from Spain. The name is, I guess, a little Spanish pun that means wine yourself. I'm kind of curious. I know we have a bit of, let's say, a tight, cool group, so we can turn it maybe into a bit of a chat, but sound off in the chat if you've had these wines, if you know these wines, never had them, what's going on. But definitely, as you say, Nick, Envinate, it's a special time of year. They come out once a year. The production's pretty small. We get them in and they're usually gone pretty fast. They're very special wines for sure, and they're pretty sought after these days. And definitely, I mean, even just kind of looking over like my wine books again today and bopping around on the internet, these guys are such a huge emblem for what people like to talk about when they talk about the new Spain or like the new generation of winemakers. So they're a real rising star, and they've really kind of made a name for themselves over the past few years, and they're doing something really unique. I think especially we're going to see their a collective of 4 people, and they're making wine in at least 4 different regions, and kind of have a few other projects on the go right now. So even just through this like one producer, we'll go on a little tour all over Spain. But what they're doing is
And
really
it's kind of fun. Like we are drinking from 3 different regions, and you think that it's, oh, that kind of makes sense. But like Spain isn't like Austria, where the wine regions are like an hour's drive from one another. Like Spain is, you on a good year is the, makes the most wine in the world. It's the largest wine producing nation in terms of volume, and like they're so far apart. Like to be able to create like a winemaking like label and an idea and a production that sort of spans very disparate regions, but also have this cohesive like idea that translates very easily, both in sort of meeting them and tasting them, but sort of understanding these wines is like you have to sort of pick it apart, and it's amazing what these people can do. They met in college, correct? Like in university?
Yeah, they're a group of 4 friends who all were in winemaking school, I guess, in the sort of like mid-early 2000s. And kind of, I guess, decided to come together as a group of friends and see what they could do. So they've been consulting and kind of starting their own projects. But I guess also most importantly, they come from a lot of these regions. So they all felt a sort of attachment to what could be done and accomplished in some of these places, and that kind of desire to express a little bit of what they thought was possible. So over the years, they pulled together some really interesting like vineyards as they sort of worked around with different people and explored different areas.
So the philosophy is to like create wines from regions within Spain, but focusing on grapes and winemaking practices traditional to that area, and sort of capture some of that history. I think that's how I've always kind of considered it, but please correct me if sort of I'm wrong by explaining that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think part of, what's interesting to talk about them as like an emblem of New Spain is this is something that comes up again and again with Spain, but they're like a younger generation of winemakers trying to make wine that's like, authentic to a sense of place, but also touching on very, as you say, like deep roots and very traditional styles, simply by just kind of being in touch and trying to be a part of the places that they're working and trying to kind of respect what's there, the grapes and the traditions that are there.
Okay, so we should start drinking some wine, I feel. The first 2 wines we're drinking are from the Canary Islands. They are a chain of islands sort of off the coast of North Africa that were colonized by Spain many centuries ago, but have a really rich and such a unique winemaking history. I've got a little map I can show you of what, like, sort of how the islands of Canary Islands, the Canary Islands, and that's where canaries come from, in case anyone was curious. It's strange because as an Australian, we actually get taught about Canary Islands because in Australian history, the first sort of prison ships that came from England to Australia, their first stop was the Canary Islands. So it's one of these weird kind of things that it's always vaguely familiar for no other reason than like a one brief paragraph in a textbook, in a history book, but it's super fun. Where's my map of Spain?
I mean, definitely kind of for better or for worse, the Canary Islands were definitely the sort of gateway to the New World during the time of Spanish colonization. And I think, that's part of what makes, as you say, this history really interesting, because the wines have been made there for hundreds of years, for sure, in a very like unbroken tradition. And also a lot of the grapes that you see in South America and Mexico and Southern California even are just direct sort of transplantations of these grapes that you really don't find anywhere else now except for the Canary Islands.
Yeah, so the Canary Islands, this is Africa here. They kind of live just sort of on the just off the coast further down, but you can sort of see the little map there. And Canary Islands are like very much in vogue in terms of new, like more interesting and sort of trendy wine regions to talk about. There's not a lot of wine coming out of there, but what we kind of found is that, it's always focused on it like indigenous varietals. So varietals that were always grown traditionally in that region. So you don't see a lot of Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Cabernet, Merlot coming out of Canary Islands. You kind of see their more traditional sort of grape varietals like Lista Negro, and there's a bunch that I can barely remember. And I don't think it's important that you remember it either. But Canary Islands, it's an iconic name, and if you like the taste of these first two wines, this is kind of what you're going to get. And the other cool thing about it is, are there what's called volcanic wines? I think we've touched over this, but wines grown on volcanic soils always have this certain charm to them and a certain kind of characteristic on the palate, and that's something that where people sort of gravitate towards as well. But Brad, why don't you talk to us about the first wine? What are we drinking? What's in our glass?
Yeah, well, thank you, I think, again, because you have picked some really interesting wines for us to drink. And we're definitely kind of jumping in feet first with, I guess, these first two. So these are from Tenerife in the Canary Islands. So this touches in a really interesting way on a lot of traditions. So this is from Tenerife, the north side, Oratava Valley, which is a place, I guess, that's very sort of mountainous and a little rougher, and it's the place that all the British tourists don't necessarily get to. And they have a really unique and old winemaking history there. So apparently, actually, Roberto from the group is from in and around this area, but they sort of stumbled upon old document that said like, this is typically like this area, this village is where some of the best wine has always been made. So that piqued their curiosity to go check it out. And essentially what they've done is collect a bunch of different vineyards. So in this case, we're drinking a white that is farmed by vines owned by 15 different families. And the vines are essentially in a vineyard that is just like volcanic sand and boulders. It's going very steeply, a couple 100 meters like down the side of a cliff right towards the ocean. And because there's no phylloxera, the vines are, let's say, 100-ish plus years old. They're all ungrafted, they're on their own roots, and they're untrained as well. So they grow pretty much just free on the ground, just like propped up on sticks. So that's
the vineyard?
So
this is the second one. So this is kind of a landscape, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. So you can really get a sense of how wild this place is and this grape growing is. And of course, also how extremely difficult it is to be harvesting here, but how kind of exciting this, talking about like a sense of place for this wine. And of course, you were saying volcanic. So it's like the intersection of volcanic and Atlantic wines. You get that sea salt, you get that sort of smoky basalt, You get some of that amazing reduction that you were talking about a little bit earlier. Those are really characteristics of these soils. Yeah, these guys are pretty natural. I saw you mentioned sulfur in the comments, so just a little bit of sulfur at bottling typically for these wines.
But yeah, Holly, if you're getting that sulfurous tone, it's just the style of winemaking. It's a little on the reductive side. And if you give it a good swirl, even a shake, it should blow off pretty quickly. But it's also a really nice, I don't know. Not for me, I was really happy to smell that because I knew that that kind of reductive charm, which is that sulfury egg kind of nose that you can sometimes get, will eventually go away. But it also means that the wines are pretty sound and they're just gonna drink deliciously.
And yeah, I would say pretty like characteristic for volcanic soil as well. Tends to be a sort of more like lend itself to reductive winemaking for sure. And I mean, for me, it's like in this wine, I mean, sound off in the chat what you guys think, but this is a really interesting wine. I think I like the way all these elements really come together, like reduction and crazy minerality and really like over the top saltiness for sure. And
yeah, it has this, it's so not sweet or fruity. It has this like savory kind of reminiscent of Gruneveltliner as well. It's so charming.
There's a real like richness and slightly oxidative quality as well to the wine that is fantastic. Like it's a complex wine. I mean, it really like jumps right out of the glass with that sort of like smoky, salty, volcanic combo. And I think, people have been cottoning on to the Canary Islands, I guess, for the last few years because it's offering something really unique, really like interesting. And this is like a really prime example of that for sure.
I'm going to put in the chat some of the grape varietals. And I mean, if you look, you'll sort of see that like these are very obscure, very rare grape varietals. And so you're not necessarily feel like you have to, if you're coming from this from a more educational standpoint to like, oh, I'm going to understand these grapes as in my palate. Like, I think this is where you kind of just have to let it go and go. It's a blend of indigenous varietals from the Canary Islands and just sort of live in that moment and not get bogged down on tasting notes and like, what does this taste like? What does that taste like? Just enjoy it. But the salty charm that you kind of describe is really prevalent, and I just enjoy this so much. And it doesn't taste like any other wine I've ever had in my entire life, and I like that. I like that I can pour this and I can share this with people and like give them a really interesting experience that is hard to sort of describe, and it's a great conversation to have with people about. Oh, how do you talk? Like, what do you taste? What do you feel? How does this wine sort of make you happy or sad?
I mean, it's really fun to like discover a place, I think. And one of the nice things about being sort of like in this particular place in Taganan and having access to these very old vines is that you really get that sort of like sense of tradition. Like it's a real mix of grapes. And as I was saying, it's like 15 different families, sort of plots pulled together who have been farming there for a long time, these very old vines. And the vines are a kind of weird mix of influences from like old Castilian kingdoms, so the people who were kind of the people doing the colonizing, and a lot of Portuguese influence as well. You can definitely see a lot of grapes that you might be finding in like Madeira, for example.
I'm curious, Brad. I mean, we were talking before we started the session about how popular these wines are and how busy your life is because they almost always sell out straight away. And I'm curious as to like, who buys these wines? Is it what we would say Spanish restaurants or Spanish cuisine, or do these wines find their home in restaurants and with all different cuisines and all different styles and flavors? I'm so curious as to like what draws people to these wines.
That's a great question, and kind of like it is a good question. I think Envinate tend to be a wine that has sort of first and foremost brought together people who are like interested in wine. So maybe it's a bit of like a nerdy wine for people in the know. And I feel like a lot of kind of how the word has spread about them has been through people who like people like Rajat Par, for example, and a lot of like other somms who are really in the public eye who have discovered their wines, a few years ago and sort of touted them as bringing something really unique. So I think they really have like gone in a lot of cases to just like people and restaurants and somms and lists that are just generally interested in wine. And I mean, now they're kind of going everywhere for sure, but
Right. I think like the more people hear about and taste these wines, like again, it's a big part of exploring the worlds of wine is, having to take a risk and go, oh, I've never heard of this Canary Islands region. Let's taste the wine. But with Envinate, they're already curating Spain for you and all Spain, these indigenous varietals from different regions. And I don't know, it's such a nice way to sort of expand your curiosity because you can trust their wines and you can, you don't have to necessarily do heaps of research to sort of taste some wines from Canary Islands. I'm so happy with that wine, and it's just a really cool one. And like again, it's one of those things that you really can't describe, and you can't like, oh, it just kind of tastes like Chardonnay, and like, it doesn't taste like anything. And I'm also curious about like age worthiness. So these ones that you sort of see people wanting to age, is that like in people's heads when they buy these wines?
I mean, that's a great point. I think most people, I would say not at all. I'm sure almost all of this wine is consumed, probably immediately, which is totally understandable. And I mean, like, especially us in North America, we're not much of a culture for like aging wine, which, I live in an apartment, like I get it. But these wines for sure age really well for me. And maybe a few months ago, I drank my last bottle of like 2016 Volcanic Red, the Benji, and it was fantastic. I mean, it just had gotten so good. So it was an interesting experiment to just kind of let it rest and hang out for a few years. But if you can do it, I would definitely happily age these wines for a couple of years for sure.
100%. Should we go on to wine number 2? Because we're still in the Canary Islands. I'm going to write, I'm not going to write the names down. I've got 1,000 things in front of me. And me trying to figure out what I'm trying to write is going to be crazy. But we're still in the Canary Islands, and this is their single vineyard project.
That's right. So this is we're in the same area. So the Taganan area, same sort of village, same location. This is the single vineyard wine, which I was telling to you, like, I have just never even tried this wine before because it all gets shipped out. So I'm very excited. But this is a single vineyard plot that is considered by Envinate and by a lot of people to be essentially probably their best vineyard in the Canary Islands, and probably definitely one of the best vineyards there. So it's an old plot. Again, you showed a picture of it earlier. So
I can do it again.
The ocean, very steep, very difficult, untrained, very old vines, 100 to 300 years old.
Yeah, this is
yeah, exactly. So that gives you a sense of them in the vineyard and sort of how wild and difficult all this work is. And the vines are just growing
crazy
on the ground, just like there's no support system, no specific like pruning system. And again, it's a real like, there's no phylloxera, so it's a real wild mix of grapes, which is a a very like old but deep tradition in winemaking that was sort of erased when phylloxera kind of reset everything. But you have quite a few different grapes adding to the sort of picture and complexity of this wine for sure.
I really like this wine because often when I drink volcanic reds, there's often this like push for acidity and there's a push for freshness to sort of create this very Burgundian kind of austerity. But with this wine, there's such fruit and such like plushness as well as minerality as well as acidity, and it's such a nice expression of volcanic wine that isn't sort of, you know, this is a warm climate. Look at that sky. Like, I don't think sun and exposure is a problem you have to have. It's, you know, the wind and the ocean sort of currents that affect the grapes more than, that blue sky, crazy good. I'm so excited.
A lot of people have kind of commented that this is like their Jurassic Park vineyard. It looks very sort of primeval, I guess.
And again, this is a blend. Here are some of the wines, some of the grape varietals in wine number 2, which is, I've heard of one of these wines. I've heard one of these grapes. And Moscatel. No, Moscatel Negro, no, never. Anyway, who knows? But this is where I'm getting that sort of smoky, kind of acrid, kind of volcanic kind of vibe, especially on the nose. You know, there is this red fruit character, but you're getting a little bit more of that kind of smoky kind of character. So good.
I'm loving, really loving, there's, a sort of behind all that, like a floral quality to this wine and a really nice, there's red fruit, but there's also like a really like lush, peachy stone fruit kind of quality that I don't often get in red wines. And it's very, it's like very mouth-watering, very delicious.
Yeah, and I get that sort of florality that you're describing. That's cool.
And I think definitely a cool tradition that you find that I think in a lot of like mixed vineyard plantings that are old is to have grapes with very different qualities planted together. So in this case, you have grapes that would often be made into sweet wine and grapes that have like very, very floral sort of profiles, as well as grapes that are more about like acid and structure. So it's definitely, you know, something that brings out like a lot of vintage variation, but makes a really like pleasing whole when it all comes together.
So considering this is the first time you've had this wine, what's like, are you happy? Are you excited? Are you going to buy more of it? Are you?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. There's I wish I could buy some, but it's all gone. There's none left. Well, I guess I could cruise down to Peter Pantry maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully I still have a little bit of all of these wines. And yeah, if anyone's interested, I'll post the links. Now that I have a new website, I'll post the links in the chat at the end. But yeah, we definitely still have some more of all of these wines. More than enough to, unless someone goes crazy, more than enough to satisfy if you want to keep any of these. And again, this would be a really good wine to sell for. This is 2019, so imagine like give it 5 years, 6 years, and just imagine how that florality will like deepen and turn to a bit like this cool, spicy kind of thing. It's a really fun one.
And that you got real structure on this wine. That acid is pretty like kicking, and that's usually a really good sign that of age worthiness, I guess, for a wine for sure. But I'm loving this wine. I'm kind of used to drinking a few other, especially like the Benji Red of their sort of volcanic wines from this region. And this one is pretty special. It really has some complex and beautiful kind of fruit and flower qualities that I'm just not kind of used to behind all that sort of like smoke and salt and real like wild volcanic stuff. So
we make a few wines from the Canary Islands, I guess. We've tasted 2 of them, but there's what you were talking about, the Benji line. So there's a few more as well.
Yep, there's like a Benji red and white, Palo Blanco, Migan Tinto, a couple, of the Taganin area. So yeah, there's a pretty kind of like comprehensive. You could take a little tour of the different vineyard sites for sure.
Yeah, and I think these are wines, if you are going to a restaurant or something, like you'll see them on the list, like, have a little checklist in your head and like explore all the different ones, because the other cool thing about Envinate that I've sort of learned is that every wine is really different, that they're not trying to, they're trying to showcase a style or a region or a plot or a village, and they're not trying to all make the same wine or make a wine that tastes as similar as possible. Like, and when we talk about this new Spain or this revival of Spain winemaking, like, this team has always been at the forefront of that conversation and have inspired a lot of winemakers all over Spain, and especially younger winemakers, to, make some really cool wines. Because like we said, when we chatted about Spanish whites when we did it a few weeks ago, like, there was this era of Spanish wines that were dominated by like,
yes,
big, bold oak, everything, and obviously Rioja is like the center of that kind of style. But even there, you're sort of seeing this trend away from, oak and, high alcohol and high extraction and these like crazy wines. But this is such a great sort of more intricate expression of Spanish wines. But I'm so excited. So good.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head. Like I was reading an interview in Punch magazine with Roberto from a few years ago that I really like, but he talks about how Spain has really kind of been dominated by like fashions and trends, especially because, they're a country that entered into the international market a little bit later because of their sort of political history. But he kind of ran down and said like 30 years ago, everyone wanted to make like Rioja. 20 years ago, everyone wanted to make like a big 200% oak Parker wine. And now the sort of like last 10 years has been like a move towards more natural wines for sure. But, they're trying to find a place where they can make authentic wine that isn't a fashion or a fad, but doesn't like issue tradition. They're trying to make a sort of like timeless wine, I guess.
Yeah, and look, I also imagine that it could be really difficult for these small wine growers to be able to make wines, especially in the Canary Islands, to make wines that can be accessible around the world. And it's really great that this team is like making such efforts and like bringing it to everyone. The alcohol level is a good question, Joanne. I'm just going to look that up.
That was a good question.
I don't have it in front of me.
Joanna, do you want to guess?
Yeah, you should guess. I do see it. Now. It is, drum roll, 12%. 12% alcohol, which is like, I mean, Robert Parker wouldn't even review a red wine that was under 12.5. It's unheard of. So,
I mean, he must have had these wines. He must have, but I can't imagine that they're to his taste. I wonder, what he's read or read about them or what.
I don't even know if he's alive. I don't even know if he's still alive. He's just this kind of boogeyman that lives in the wine world of the natural winemakers. It's like this threat of what would Robert Parker say? Well, I don't know. Robert Parker's probably got a great palate of wine, but he probably makes his money selling and talking and reviewing really expensive Californian wines. So, I can't fault him for making his coin, but like maybe he loves this stuff. Okay. We're leaving the Canary Islands, everyone. I'm really sorry. We're going to mainland Spain, but there is a ton of really cool producers from Canary Islands that aren't just Envinate, that you can even find it sometimes at the LCBO. So like keep an eye out. If this is kind of what you like, if you like this kind of like textural, rocky, kind of smoky kind of style of wines, like go to a wine shop, go to your restaurant and say, hey, I want a wine from Canary Islands. I don't see a situation where you're not kind of getting this cool expression, and this kind of low alcohol, kind of fun expression of wine. But there's always exceptions in the wine world. But if you liked it, I really hope you enjoyed this. Like I would love to do a big Canary Island tasting, but I don't have time anymore. Anyway, we're going to wine number 3. Okay, Albera. There is 3 wines. Three wines over my 4 years at Peter Pan that people like my team have like fixated on, that can't stop talking about it. And for them, when I throw wines at them almost every single day, a new one, new varietal for them to learn, they value having a really cool wine that they all agree that they love. And this is wine number 1. This has always been on their list. And this has been the only one that I've ever had at Peter Pan, apart from the wines you have in front of you. And I think this is literally the 4th year in a row that I've brought this wine because it is so good. So this is the Albera, very iconic label. I should put the label up. I don't have in the bottles in front of me because I'm like really was crazy busy today. But here's the label, very iconic. Brad, tell us about this wine. What is this wine? Why does it exist?
Yeah, so this is a big departure from what we have been drinking for sure. So this is going to the Mediterranean side of Spain. This is the South Mediterranean in an area called El Monza, which is sort of like, let's say sort of the bottom of the sort of Castilian area. There you go, perfect. And definitely totally different kind of exposition and terroir. So this is like a high, dry, semi-arid. It's essentially almost like a wine desert that these vines are growing in. And it's very associated with huge, full-bodied wines, which this wine is not at all, which is pretty interesting. But
12.5. I think if you saw the label, it was 12.5. So that's crazy. You have to decide to do that. It doesn't just happen. You have, as a winemaker, you have to go, okay, we want to keep this alcohol in check, and use acidity as kind of the backbone rather than the alcohol, the tannins. And it's wonderful. This is so good. Grape varietal is, I forget.
Yeah, so it's 2 grapes, I guess, combined. It's a Garnacha Tintorera, which is a sort of like modern, kind of weird hybrid that pops up all over Spain and Portugal, especially, and a few other places. That's like a pretty deep red kind of fruity grape. And another grape that's become quite rare that you find a little bit in this area called Moravia, which is a sort of thinner skinned, higher acid grape that traditionally was like grown to blend with these like bigger, bolder grapes like Bobel and other things that were grown in this area to freshen them up a little. But because people hadn't really cared about that for a long time, most of it got ripped up. But this wine is kind of one of the few wines that you can really see like a strong presence of Moravia in.
Grenache Tintorera has this really cool like place in wine history because it's what it's really known for is its color. It's this really deep purple color, and so there's been a few scandals, probably like 100 years ago, not in Spain, but mainly in America, in like North America, where this was also grown, where people would add water to the grapes, like dilute the wine, because of its strong color. They were able to like fool people into thinking that it wasn't, like they could add water without people knowing the difference. But that's like a little tidbit of like weird, knowledge that I have about this grape varietal. But I like it. It's so good. It's just like furry, like wild brambly fruit. It's just so special.
Yeah, Bramley is a great description of this fruit. There's a little bit of florality as well that I always really like, and always there's some really interesting, like kind of subtle spice notes that always kind of catch me. I'm really fixated on like orange rind right now as I drink this, but yeah.
Oh, so good up. I really enjoy, like, again, like I said, this is the fourth vintage I've tasted, and this is such a perfect wine to sell, like to give people and show people if they've never had it before, because there's this such pleasurable charm to this wine. Whereas the first two wines we had are a little bit more intellectual, a little bit more esoteric, and you kind of have to explain where they come from. And not that this isn't worth explaining, but it's in the glass. People go, oh, this is pretty great. This is loads of fruit, loads of flavor, really smooth, ripe, juicy, delicious wine that isn't 14, 15% alcohol. It's 12.5. It's crazy cool.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully everyone's kind of feeling this way, but I feel like I've never, even when I've worked in restaurants or whatever, I've never like given this wine to someone that has not loved it. As you say, it's like extremely charming. It's fresh, it's drinkable, it's digestible, it's interesting. It's affordable. I would like love to have it with almost any food I could think of. Even from like fish to like roast chicken or whatever, but it's very good. Like it really is an appealing wine. Like, yeah.
This was the first time I tasted it like this vintage. So it's always such a relief because I think I bought like a lot of this wine. And I was like, oh, I was like, great, I'm not gonna have any trouble selling this wine because it's one of the ones that I'm very confident in selling because I just know how crowd pleasing it is. Is this their like most popular wine? Or like, is this their like?
Yeah,
you'll see this more often than not. I think it's probably like you'll see this around a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is kind of the closest thing they get to like an entry level wine from any other estate is what you call it, I guess. So they're able to make more of this for sure, and it comes in at a great price. And for sure you'll see it around, I think, at your favorite shops and restaurants. And
yeah, if you're going to a shop, if you're going to a wine shop, you'll recognize that, and you love this wine, you'll become very familiar with the color, like the label, that yellow, that canary yellow, which is kind of exactly what the color is very iconic and something that people resonate with, and it will absolutely resonate with you too. It's so good. I mean, there's not a lot to say. And like wines from this region, it's a very hot region, and it's kind of the home of bulk wine, bulk Spanish wine. So to have, and no one's going to do a deep dive in the Almasa region. Then no one's going to go into Castiglione and go, oh, these are how beautiful and world-class these wines are, which is fine. It's not a slight against them, but I'm saying like this is such a special wine from this region, and it's great. It's great that you don't need to make bulk wines in these warm regions. You can still make a really cool, interesting wine that has charm and tells a story. You don't have to plant Tempranillo or Grenache.
Yeah,
there are indigenous varietals there.
I think this is something I'm always fascinated. I mean, I get to like drink a lot of Spanish wine and talk to a lot of our Spanish producers, but one thing that kind of always comes up is that, of course, in Europe, like wine is something that's always around and is a really important staple of like everyday consumption. And for a lot of people making wine now, they're very aware that their grandfathers or grandparents and previous generations working in the fields would have drank like literally a liter to a liter and a half of wine every day, almost as like a substitute for water, while they were working under the hot sun. And the wines that they drank are not necessarily the wines that we drink. They were actually fresher wines. They often were field blends. They often had a little bit of white wine mixed in them. They often had less like maceration and skin contact and less alcohol. And they were just part of your diet. So this is, again, like it's a big, as you say, it's like a kind of bulk wine region. It's a big, hot red wine region, but that doesn't mean that's always the way things were, and that's always the way things sort of like ought to be or need to be. There's other options.
Yeah, I definitely, Spain is that one region where there's a lot of there's a lot of assumptions made with these regions, like, you know, Sherry or Rioja or Priorat or, you know, to anywhere where you go. But there's always exceptions. And even if you don't like that Rioja that, you know, your friend spent $30 on at the LCBO that has weird wire on over the bottle, that has fake dirt on it, we all know the wine. That doesn't mean that Rioja is bad, and all that whole region, that's all those wine, that's the wine, the only wine, that style of wine you can get from that region. You know, you can afford to explore a little and ask a little bit more questions, and you'll get wines that you like. Look, these are wines that I like. I don't like in reality, I don't want to drink 15, 14, 16% alcohol wines, red wines. I want 12, 13% wines. And, you know, I would love to say that that's a trend around the world. It's not. It's just, I mean, the reality is people still want big, bold wines, but this is kind of what I like. And if this is what you kind of like, you know, you can afford to, you can still have a Rioja experience and drink 12% wine. You don't have to have 14, 15% wines with oak and everything going along. And the same can be said in all the regions around, in and around Spain. I think this, as an entry-level wine, as an entry point into Spain, as an entry point into natural wines, as an entry point into Spanish natural wines or Envinate, the Albera is such a perfect wine for it. I couldn't imagine another wine that would tick so many boxes and still be so delicious.
It hits all the quadrants.
Absolutely. And you'll also, like, considering these wines have just landed in the city, there should be numerous restaurants around that are pouring this by the glass. So even if you don't want to buy a bottle, even if, you know, you don't feel like doing that, like, there's going to be a patio somewhere that has this by the glass. And I can absolutely assure you that label is so photographic or photogenic that it will be on your Instagram feed within a week, 100%. If it's not already, I don't know. I can talk about Albera all day. It's such a great wine. But we've got one more wine to taste. And this wine, so good. This is the craziest, coolest wine I've tasted in a very long time. So I'm very happy that I got to share it with everyone. Brad, what do we got? What's wine number 4?
Wine number 4 is, so again, we're jumping wildly to a completely different part of Spain. So we're going up to the Atlantic side of Spain. This is what people would call green Spain or Celtic Spain. It's pretty like lush. It's pretty wet. It's pretty cool. Lots of rain. This is an amazing area. You can see Ribera Sacra labeled there. So it's a series of essentially like bare slate and granite cliffs hovered around some rivers cutting sort of like deep through the hills, that the Romans built steep terraces to do their winemaking a long time ago. And the tradition is still there. So you have these, if anyone is familiar with the Mosel, it looks something like that, but you have these very like steep, difficult terraces of wine. And it's mostly Mencia, which this wine is. Fantastic grape. And this is a single vineyard called Seon, which is just like a special particular kind of parcel of Menthea that's fairly old vines. I think about 80 years old. And on quite like one of these very steep terraced vineyards. This actually, I mean, these wines, the Lucis wines in particular, so Lucis in this case is like the local word for the slate soil. But these might be the ones that really kind of put Envinate on the map, or really got a lot of people. They're wines that just when people have tasted them have, really ignited their imaginations, I guess, and hopefully that wine bears that out and it makes sense. This vintage that I've been tasting, I haven't even tasted this one yet, but the 2019 is very, very good. I would say it's been a really good year. Good wines.
So good. This wine is pricey. It's $95 at Peter Pantry, but there's so many layers to this wine almost immediately, like the structure, the fruit, the spice, the minerality. Like Menthea sometimes is compared to like Gamay, and it's kind of like considered, the Beaujolais of kind of makes that kind of like fuzzy fruit, brambly kind of easy drinking wine. And it's true, like it's not super tannic, it's not a super serious wine. You can put oak on it, but it lends itself to being a bit more unoaked. But like this one is so special. The minute I tasted it, and the minute like when I opened it on Saturday, Friday, and when I tasted it today, it's still so captivating. There's so much going on here.
Yeah, there's a real intensity to that fruit that you were talking about. Like it's a very deep, like ripe blackberry, something like that.
It's such a good wine. There's so much going on. There's so much length. There's so much flavor. And it doesn't, for what's in popular sort of opinion, considered a very simple grape. This isn't expressing as a simple grape. This is expressing in the same way Pinot Noir can express. There's loads of things going on. Almost like Syrah as well, like that kind of like charm and that kind of like depth of flavor and that concentration that you can often get in Syrah. This is pretty special.
Definitely.
I don't know how they make this. I just don't understand how a wine like this exists. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit maybe even like the Canary Islands in a sense that this is a region that has really been forgotten. Winemaking's been here for thousands of years at this point, but there's kind of small groups of dedicated winemakers. I mean, not just in Envinate, but you can find others around who are coming back to this region and touching again on these like very old traditions of winemaking. I remember reading recently that the average age of a winemaker in this region is 67 years old. So
that's crazy.
The winemaking is so difficult and so taxing, and has been until recently, and maybe still is, so like unrewarding, that young generations just have not taken up the mantle. Like they haven't had a lot of reason to, but that's left some pretty interesting possibilities for people who are really dedicated to making wine here.
I remember probably like 5 years ago, I was like listening to some kind of wine podcast, and like especially a New York Somm was on, and he was saying how like Ribera Sacra is like the cool new wine region, and we don't see a huge amount of Ribera Sacra in Ontario, but you can see why people go crazy for this wine. It's pretty special, and this is the wine that this specific wine is definitely the wine I've seen on most of my like sommelier friends, like Instagram, in their cellars, the things that they pull out. And you can understand why. Like this is such a special wine. I'm so happy I get to share it with everyone and talk to Brad about it. But and then the one other thing I wanted to say is that there's also a really other classic region of Spain called Ribera del Duero. And so just, understand that they're very, very different wine regions with very different wine styles, different climates, different kind of histories. So, you know, it can be sometimes confusing, but remember Ribera Sacra, you know, as the way to like remember this region. But Menthia, you know, you can see a lot of it. You know, if you want to explore more of this like new wave Spain, you'll see Menthia as like pretty much, you know, the flagship grape of that kind of like low intervention style, and rightly so. This is pretty fun. This is also a whole bunch cluster for the people who attended our whole cluster wine fest. This is as whole cluster as it gets, and you can understand why it's got that kind of charming nose. This is the one that I could just smell. I don't even need to taste it. I just want to smell it. I just want to figure out what I'm smelling. Oh.
Yeah, these wines have a beautiful, like floral violet quality. I don't know. I'm maybe not the best with flowers, but that violets is definitely the first thing I think of. That's really beautiful. And I always think, I mean, not just this wine, but these kind of wines in particular always make me think about minerality. And it's something we don't always discuss in the context of red wines very much, but in this wine, it makes a lot of sense when you think about like granite and slate. It's really coming through. Yeah.
So special. I hope that everyone who's tasting this is like having this aha moment that I am. And I hope you're sharing in the wonder of this wine, because this is so special. This is the wine where I if I didn't know they were already sold out, I would have absolutely emailed Brad 5 minutes after we hung up and said, I need every single bottle of this wine, because I just want to sell this and pour this and drink this and keep this in my cellar at any time. It's so special.
Yeah. There are like, this is for this area, Lucis area in Ribera Sacra that they're working. They make a few different wines. So this is let's say a pretty rare single parcel. And they have another one called Camino Novo, a single vineyard. And then they have a village wine that's like a blend of a few sites that you can see more quantity of. So if you're interested, it's around.
I mean, we've got, you know, the Albuera, the Canary Islands, the Ribera Sacra projects. Are there other places that Envinate kind of exploring into? Are they, you know, going to make an Albarino? Are they making Rioja? I don't know. I'm curious as to like the future of Envinate, and if you know any of that, what they're up to. I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess we're kind of drinking through like their sort of main wines, main sites, but they do have some interesting projects. In kind of particular, they've worked a little bit with the Alvear family in southern Spain and made some pretty interesting wines there. Not even necessarily in their own label, but you can find like it's like the Tres Miriadores wine, for example, from Alvear. That's really delicious. And I mean,
I've got one bottle. If anyone's curious, I have one bottle left of that one. It's so good.
And I'm curious to see what they'll continue to do in the future, for sure. Yeah.
This is if as I hope, dearly hope, that you have been enamored by these wines and like have sort of fallen in love with this, you know, Envinate. You will see this you will see this around the world. You will see these wines in every cool wine bar, wine shop around the world. And you know, this is such a great wine. And like in terms of like price, you know, the wines 2 and 4 were $95 a bottle. Like that's expensive, I'll admit, but like in the world of wine, that's still, there's lots of value in that. And I think these are pretty special. So, Brad, did you have a favorite tonight? I'm just curious. I know I did, and I think it's pretty clear which one I loved, but I mean, maybe it's not clear, but
I mean, I'm loving number 4, and I really also love number 2. But, I mean, I love them all, but these are, I mean, as I was saying earlier, like these are wines I don't get to drink very often. I work with them, but I don't like get to like sit down and taste them and contemplate them. So it's very special to be able to do that.
And I agree. And like I could have easily bought all of these 4 wines, and if without doing a tasting with you and doing this, I probably may have not tasted them either. And tasting them, especially tasting them side by side and sort of going through sort of understanding the winemaking style, we're entering a period of time where there's a lot of question marks when you talk about natural wine. Is it faltered? How do they make this? What sulfur do they use? A lot of questions. And the confidence, tasting these wines gives me so much confidence. So like wholeheartedly, sell these wines to people so that, and knowing that, I mean, we put them in a pouch after 4 days, they're singing, and that's a really rarer than you would imagine. So I just had such a lovely time. I don't know. It's so special. And considering how crazy my life is right now, this is such a nice and I think contemplation is such a nice way of putting it. Like this was this like meditation on like Spanish wines that was so special. I really want to meet them if they ever get to come back to Toronto. And I want to understand this even more. There's so much more I can go into. I want to go to Canary Islands. I want to understand. I want 1,000 Ribera Sacra wines and just understand all of this. But Brad, thank you so much. Before everyone leaves, please tell me what your favorite wine was. I'm so curious in the chat. But Brad, thank you so much for tonight. I obviously enjoy your company, and I enjoyed chatting. I hope you had fun. Hope you enjoyed your night. And I'm glad you got to taste these ones. If nothing else, this was a favor to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it's a pleasure to be on here talking, and thanks for everyone who obviously is with us drinking these wines, hopefully really enjoying them. And thanks, you curated a really, really nice little collection of Envinate wines. And I mean, as you know, I haven't been drinking much lately, and I've just been like so looking forward to cracking into these wines and tasting them and enjoying them a little bit. And it has not disappointed. They've been very, very good. So it's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. Before we sign off, I put in the chat, if anyone's interested in buying the wines, go. I don't care about if you buy them or not. I don't actually, it's fine. I'll buy them myself. But because I'm like learning my new website and understanding it, if you put the promo code Envinate 15, you'll get 15% off. Why not? Let's make this a sales call. But also explore the new website. If you're into exploring and going into restaurants, we're just under 3 weeks away from opening the new Peter Pantry. It's a very hectic time for me, but I'm so excited to be able to like share it with you. We'll have a great wine shop. We'll have a little wine bar so people can sit. We'll be open from 8 a.m. to midnight, so you can have coffee or buy a bottle of wine or drink a glass of wine. And I really want it to be a fun place where I can finally meet everyone and just like meet you all in person. I feel like there's at least 50 people that I have online relationships with who I would never, I could walk past them in the street and never know who they were. So I'm excited to finally have an environment where we can just hang out and I can pour some cool stuff. Definitely going to pour some of this wine. I can absolutely tell you for certain there is absolutely 6 bottles that I'm putting around the cellar tomorrow morning and not letting people buy them at all so that I can share them with you. But Brad, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. This has been such a pleasure. I hope everyone had fun. I hope these ones were fun. And we'll see everyone soon for the next Wine Coach. I don't know what it's going to be. I have no time in the world to think about these things, but if you have any ideas or anything you want to learn or something you want me to focus on, let me know. Brad, have a good night. Send my love to Krista. I will see everyone soon. Okay. Bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.